I think we can just start now, I guess. We're expecting like 2 or 3 additional people, but I guess they're probably either running late or cancel without notice. But I figured we have this room until 8:30 officially, but we can stay here until the library closes at 9. My name is Jim Gao, and I'm the Hbar Hashgraph ambassador here in Providence, Rhode Island, and welcome everyone to the first Hashgraph Meetup here in Providence. I know Raj drove 70 miles from Massachusetts to attend. Tony, where are you from?
Kingstown.
Oh wow, that's pretty far away too. 40 minutes. Right?
No, I didn't say anything after him. Can't complain.
Yes. And so, do you mind if I ask where?
I'm right from here in Providence.
Oh, okay, cool. And Alice is from Providence too. I also live, not too far away from here, like 5 minutes drive. To me, I got into Hbar Hashgraph around January of 2018. That was when I first heard about it. I didn't really take too much stock in the technology. I thought it was just another, blockchain similar to Bitcoin and Ethereum in 2018. And it wasn't until last summer when I revisited the topic I realized that this is going to be the future, for decentralized ledger technology. And that's why I became heavily involved in this space. I attended the Hbar 18 conference last year in Dallas, Texas, where I met Dr. Lehman Beard, the founder of Hashgraph. And that was, that meeting really cemented my faith in the project, because here, you have this, one of the most brilliant minds, I think, in the world, the inventor of Hashgraph. But when you talk to him, you sense that all of his attention is focused on you, as an individual. He's like one of the most humble persons I've ever met. And I have a lot of faith in the algorithm he designed, he developed, but I also have a lot of faith in him as an individual, as an entrepreneur, and a leader. So I became an ambassador earlier this year, and immediately after I became an ambassador, I began to host meetings for Hashgraph. But in the beginning, I was just doing it on my own, and nobody was really attending. But this is like the first official sanction by Hbar. I guess that's probably where you hear it from, probably from the official Twitter account of Hbar, to attend. So it depends on the feedback today. I might host more events like this, once a month or once a quarter at least. So let's dig into Hbar Hashgraph, and we start talking about the founders. Just like any great company, like whether talking about Microsoft or Google or Apple, they're founded by 2 good friends. Same thing with Hbar Hashgraph. You have the person on the left is Dr. Lehman Beard, who is the CTO and the chief scientist. He was a professor of computer science at Air Force Academy when he first met his lifetime friend, Dr. Mance Harmon. And they became really good friends, and for the subsequent 25 years, they set up several ventures together and successfully sold several of the companies they started. And in 2015, late 2015, Dr. Beard had this idea that he wanted to tackle a multi-decade-long problem that has been plaguing the computer science community, which was how to efficiently use the voting algorithm to reach consensus in a distributed network. Because, for those who are really familiar with voting algorithm, it's a legacy algorithm that has been in existence for decades, since the 70s. But the problem with the voting algorithm is that even though it's really secure, it achieves what they call Byzantine fault tolerant, which is the highest standard of security in consensus algorithms. But it's not really efficient, especially for a large network that consists of thousands and millions of nodes. Because to tally up all those votes from each individual node, it will take weeks, if not months, to do that. So there's no practical applications in the real world that implements the voting algorithm. So Dr. Beard, his idea was, this is a very secure protocol. Let's try to use it. Let's try to change something to make it useful in the real world. So he did that in 2015 for the next 6 months. He really hunkered down to solve this problem. And he eventually came up with a solution, and the solution he came up with was Hashgraph. So what is Hashgraph? It is a DLT, distributed ledger technology, and similar to blockchain. Blockchain is also another type of DLT, but Hashgraph is different in terms of topology and the way of implementation. For blockchain, you can almost imagine it like a tree. A tree has a main trunk, and as time goes on, the tree will branch out from the main trunk to different branches. And because of that, blockchain was designed to slow down the consensus process. For Bitcoin, for example, each block was produced on average 10 minutes. And the reason for that is they want to give the nodes enough time to reach a consensus to see what's the main trunk, the main chain that the new block is going to be added onto the blockchain. If you speed up that process, then the trade-off is going to be less secure for the network. So for Hashgraph, we use a different topology, and you do not have to trade security for speed. To achieve that, Dr. Beard combined a gossip protocol. Gossip protocol, for those who are not familiar with, is the fastest protocol out there to propagate information on the network. It's really fast, very efficient, but it's not really secure. There's no way to reach consensus, through gossip protocol. And what the breakthrough of Dr. Beard is to combine gossip protocol to virtual voting, to voting. He made a little change in voting, made it into virtual voting to efficiently and quickly disseminate events and achieve consensus. And that way, there's minimum amount of data being transferred, and there's a little demand on the power consumption of the network. So let's touch on a little bit of consensus algorithms, just different categories. The one we're most familiar with is the proof of work-based. The examples are Bitcoin and Ethereum. The POW, they have algorithms, they have many advantages. Many, they are DDoS attack resistant. They have immutable audit trails. That means, nobody can go back to in history and change the previous blocks. Or it's relatively impossible for people to do that. In order to do that, you've got to have, half the hash power of the world, in order to attack Bitcoin network. And it's also scalable, and we see that, for the past 10 years, Bitcoin has grown out from this server, on some guy's basement to millions of nodes hosted by, millions of people all over the world. So it's highly scalable, but it has many disadvantages. Of course, the main one is that it requires a lot of computation to run the network. They say that in 2018, the Bitcoin network consumed more power than the entire country of Ireland. And if the current trajectory persists, within 2 years, Bitcoin network would consume more power than the country of Japan. So clearly it's not sustainable. And that's the inherent flaw of these proof of work models. Another problem with with Bitcoin is that it has relatively low throughput. Bitcoin can handle about 3 to 7 transactions per second. Ethereum does better, it can handle probably up to 20 transactions per second. If you compare that to some of the centralized platforms, like Visa, for example, the Visa network can handle up to 50,000 transactions per second. If you ever lived in China, you have used some of their payment platforms like Alipay and WeChat Pay, they can handle up to 200,000 transactions per second. Of course, the latter three I mentioned, they were all centralized platforms versus Bitcoin and Ethereum, which were decentralized. But still, it can't really be practical solution to payment in the real world with only 3 to 7 transactions per second. And that's where Hashgraph shines. In 2016, when Hashgraph just came about, Hbar did a global testing on the throughput of the network. Hbar was able to achieve 500,000 transactions per second, globally and per shard. Shard is sharding as like a subnet of a network. So you have a global network consists of millions of nodes. but you can also break them into shards, subnetworks. So each network, each subnetwork can achieve 500,000 transactions per second. So in terms of throughput and performance, Hashgraph is head and shoulders above the other platforms, whether it's centralized or decentralized. Next category, we have leader-based algorithms. These algorithms, they have advantages of low power consumption. Also, they have immutable audit. Their throughput is improved somewhat, improved from dozens of transactions per second to thousands. But they have also disadvantages as well. The main one is that even though in a leader-based system, the hackers cannot attack the members, they can still attack the leader. And if they successfully attack the leader, then the entire network falls. So
how many leaders is possible? So any number of leaders are possible, or only one leader?
Well, it depends on the implementation. In EOS, for example, they have these leaders called super nodes.
Okay.
They have 21, I think, globally. It really depends on the architecture, the design.
Okay.
I would say that there's going to be a trade-off. The more leaders you have, the more it's prone to attack. Because the attackers can just select one and attack it. But if you have only one, then you have to dedicate a lot of resources, to make sure nobody attacks that one. Because if that falls, the entire network falls.
Okay.
Right. So it's susceptible to DDoS attacks. And another problem with leader-based algorithms is that the leader can influence the consensus process in terms of timestamp and access and order. So it's not really fair, in that sense. It's not really a fair decentralized algorithm, and it's not as scalable. Some of these, because of these characteristics of leader-based algorithms, they're mainly used in a closed environment, like within a corporation, or like a subnet or private net. That's why we see the examples in real life. You have Hyperledger, the R3 Corda, and EEA and Quorum. These are not really implemented as public ledgers in the world. Next, we have economy-based algorithms, and they share some of the advantages with the POWs in terms that they're immutable. They also DDoS attack resilient. They require low computation power to support, and they are highly available. But the disadvantage of these algorithms is that they are not Byzantine fault tolerant. Basically, what that means is that there's not a true finality being reached on the network for consensus. And contrary to popular belief, even Bitcoin is not Byzantine fault tolerant. What Bitcoin does is that as time goes on and more blocks add onto the chain, one can be more and more certain that it has reached a consensus. But it can never reach 100%. It's like a Pareto point, diminishing marginal returns. As time goes on, it approaches 100%, but it can never really hit 100%. And Byzantine fault tolerant, you have to reach finality, 100% sure that consensus is reached. And because of this flaw, the economy-based algorithms, they can't really provide certainty of consensus. So you cannot take the result from these platforms to a third party, let's say to a court. You can really bring let's say there's a legal dispute between two parties. You can't really take whatever information you gather from these platforms into court and say, this is legit, because the other person will argue. There's always a possibility it is not. And that is, the inherent flaw in these algorithms. Some of the examples are Casper, IOTA, EOS, and Tezos. Then we have the voting-based algorithms. These are legacy ones from the 70s. We mentioned before that they are very secure, stable. They are Byzantine fault tolerant. They're also resilient to DDoS attacks, and they don't require high computation to run. But the disadvantage is that it's not practical. Especially for networks with large numbers of nodes. It takes a long time to reach consensus on these. And that's why until now, there's not a useful case in real life to implement the voting-based algorithms until today, until the invention of Hashgraph. And the stroke of genius Dr. Beard had is to make the change of the voting algorithm to do virtual voting. So that's why Hashgraph solves many of the shortcomings that's inherent in other consensus algorithms, in terms that it's Byzantine fault tolerant. And not only it's Byzantine, it's actually asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. And that's considered as the golden standard for security in consensus algorithms. It's highly, it has high throughput in the order of hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. And just like Bitcoin, it's immutable, the record. It's DDoS attack resilient. And it's really fair when it comes to transaction access and order and timestamp. So you can already see that some of the use cases of this is stock market trading. You can order the orders that come in with fair, secure, and reliable timestamp to know which order was submitted first. And it deploys a proof of stake model instead of proof of work. So there's low requirement on power consumption. It's highly available and highly scalable. The only problem with Hashgraph is that it's really new. It's only been around for 3 years. So there's not been a lot of big community being formed around Hashgraph yet. But I suspect later this summer, when open access is available for Hashgraph, when people start using it and realize how much faster it is compared to blockchain technology, you'll see many developers and teams going to migrate from Ethereum and EOS and NEO onto Hashgraph.
I didn't participate in the phase 1 testing. Sorry.
Yes.
I didn't participate in the phase 1 testing, but many that did, gave great accolades to it. I guess it was.
Oh yes. I used. I participated in phase 1. I participated in phase 2 too. I used. I get my family and friends involved as well. And if you just do the transaction of the coins, the native currency, it's lightning fast. Fraction of a second.
Right.
Versus Bitcoin, it takes hours. Yeah. In 2017, it will take sometimes days to transact. And another advantage of Hashgraph is the low transaction cost. In 2017, during the bubble, the transaction cost of Bitcoin was like in the order of $50, $60. And even if you transact $2 worth of Bitcoin, you charge you that much. But for Hashgraph, the transaction cost is usually a fraction of a penny. So it's much cheaper. And that enables micro and nano payments on the network, which we'll address later. So how does Hashgraph work? The Hashgraph gives each node the entire picture of who has talked to whom and when. And because each node knows what every node knows, so each node can calculate what every other node would vote. And that essentially is virtual voting. You don't have to tally up every vote, because you know what every node would vote. So you can do, all you need to do is just do a calculation and figure out what the consensus of all the nodes is. And each node runs the same consensus algorithm using the Hashgraph as an input. And because all nodes use the same algorithm and inputs, the community reaches a consensus on order and timestamp. And to illustrate this graphically, Dr. Beard created a video on YouTube. It's a short video, only 4 minutes long, talking about how Hashgraph consensus works.
Hello, I'd like to talk to you about how the Hashgraph consensus algorithm works. Suppose we have a bunch of computers. We'll imagine 8 that are named Alice through Hank. So Alice has a transaction she wants to send out. She puts it inside of a message, and that message she sends out by using a gossip protocol. This means she sends it to a random person, and then each of them sends it to a random person, they send it to a random person, and exponentially fast it explodes outwards, and the whole world knows about it. Now, with Bob and Carol have transactions they want to send. Well, they put them inside of messages. messages, which they then send out to random people, so there are 2, then 4, then 8, and it blows up exponentially. But how do we know what time each message reached the world as a whole? Well, we could keep track of when each person received each message. And we could take those times, and we could sort them, all the times for the red message, and so on, and then we could take the middle of the list. This tells you when the red message reached most of the world, and when the blue one did, and when the green one did. And if we sort the messages by that, that puts them into a fair order. So now we have them in order. Oh, but wait. How do we know when each person received each message? Sounds like we had to send out a lot of receipts. No, we'll send no receipts at all. Here's how. When we're doing our talking, we can draw this graph of how we talk to each other. Alice talked to Dave, so we draw a line from Alice to Dave, and then they talked, and we have 2 more lines, and then more, and then the blue and the green come into our graph. And then they spread and spread and spread. And the result is this big diagram of how we've all talked to each other, this graph. But we could create a message for every circle in the graph. It has whatever transactions you want to create. It has a timestamp of when you're claiming that you're creating it. It has your digital signature, and it includes 2 hashes. A cryptographic hash of the last message you made and the last message you received. And just by adding the 2 hashes, it ties them all together. And so we could actually store this graph in memory on every computer, and we would all know the complete history of how we talk to each other. We're not just gossiping the transactions. We are actually gossiping out indirectly this graph itself. We're gossiping about the gossip. We are actually talking about how we're talking. And once we all have this hash graph in memory, we can just look at it and do virtual voting, which means we just look at it and we know the timestamp of when each person received each message. We don't have to talk to each other about it. We don't have to send out additional messages about when you receive things and about what orders to put things in. You get it for free. Virtual voting. So, how does Hashgraph consensus work? We want to put the transactions in order. How do we do that? We'll sort them by the order of the events. But what's the order of the events? You just sort them by the consensus timestamp for each of these events. But what's the consensus timestamp on an event? It'll be the median of the received time. It'll be the middle of all those times of when it reached everybody in the world. What's the received time? Well, it's when an active computer, an active node, received it. The computers that around that time were each sending events to many of the nodes. But what do we mean at that time, sent events to many? Well, we mean during that round. We all have this history in the Hashgraph. We break up history into a bunch of rounds. And we just look at it and say, okay, during that, if they did, they have a famous witness. And did it reach many people at once? If they did, we call that witness famous. And we will weight all of this virtual voting by the stake that they are holding, how many Hbars they own. So, it is gossip about gossip with virtual voting. And that is the Hashgraph consensus algorithm.
So this is a very high-level view of how Hashgraph works. If you're interested, you can search for Hbar Hashgraph channel on YouTube. And Dr. Beard has a 1-hour course going into details, on the mechanisms of Hbar Hashgraph consensus. That goes into much more detail than this. So if you want to break up DLTs into different generations, eras, you can start with Bitcoin. In the advent of Bitcoin in 2009, for the first time in human history, Bitcoin enabled 2 people across from different parts from the globe to transact value remotely without, peer-to-peer, without going through a third party, whether it's a central bank or institution or government. So that's the breakthrough of Bitcoin. And several years later, people realized, we can probably put records and deeds onto these blockchains. And in 2016, 2015 timeframe, Vitalik Buterin came up with Ethereum blockchain and enabled smart contracts. So right now you can actually develop decentralized applications, apps, on these blockchains. But it's not until now, 2016 to present, where Hashgraph enables not only dApps to be developed, but also can be run efficiently in real-world application cases. And we expect that to happen, when open access took place later this summer. So you can liken the evolution of DLT to that of the internet. Remember, like in the early 90s, you had the 14.4K modems, really, really slow. They evolved into 28.8K, 56K, then eventually to fiber optics. And just like in the early days of the internet, there are many applications like video streaming. It's not feasible to be done, because the network was so slow. And same thing with DLTs. You can think of Bitcoin as like the first generation, like the 14.4K modem, while Hashgraph is like the fiber optics. So right now with this platform, with the throughput and the performance, I think there are many decentralized applications, not only feasible to be developed, but also can be implemented and be run efficiently by millions of people all around the world on this platform. So with the new properties of Hashgraph comes new use cases. Hashgraph, in addition to all the existing blockchain use cases, Hashgraph can do more. Like one of the use cases is markets, decentralized exchanges, for example. If you're ever involved in crypto trading for the past 2 years, you know what a fiasco the centralized exchanges are. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, Binance got hacked. They lost like 7,000 bitcoins. And that's, in a long stream of hacks, all the way from Mt. Gox, from Bitfinex, the people behind these centralized exchanges, they either get the exchanges hacked, or they orchestrate some kind of exit scam, or they disappear, with people's coins. And I think investors, they're sick and tired of this. That's why there's a huge demand for decentralized exchanges to come to market. And I think right now it's feasible with Hashgraph because of the performance. They have micro and nano payments. Imagine, you can have a platform that links musicians directly together to music consumers, bypassing the middlemen, like the labels and iTunes, Spotify. And in turn, give the majority of the revenue from streaming to the content creators, to artists, instead of to those third-party companies. And we already have that app developed on Hashgraph called the Hero.fm, which we'll talk about later. And on Hero.fm, you can actually you can stream a song for a fraction of a penny cost. You can even listen to half a song, for even a smaller price. And that's only possible with the nano and the micro payments that's enabled by Hashgraph. Then you have the public ledger improvements, a proof of receipt. Last year, Tencent, a conglomerate in China, they designed a blockchain-based receipt repository. For receipts, you don't have to have a lot of demand on the timeliness of the receipt, because you can settle once a day or once a week. But imagine you can do the same thing on Hashgraph and improve the speed, several order of magnitude. So, Hashgraph can do that as well, but faster. Next, you have the time-limited business transactions. I think one of the biggest limitations of Bitcoin is it's just too slow. Imagine if you go to a coffee shop and buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin, and the owner has to wait for hours, if not days, to receive that payment. It's not practical. Now with Hashgraph, this latency is reduced down to seconds or a fraction of a second. Then you have identity. I think that's a very big demand. We can have decentralized repositories, databases, that links someone's online profile to his true identity in real life. And this repository, this database, cannot be tampered, controlled, manipulated, changed by anyone or organization in this world. It's completely decentralized and completely secure. And this can be implemented on Hashgraph. Games, that's another big potential. Imagine we can have decentralized platforms where players can buy and sell equipments and armors and weapons of these games, and then they can transact through micropayments, fraction of a penny. They tried to do that, I think, with Neo last year, but because of the limitation of the Neo network, they couldn't implement it. But with Hashgraph, now it's possible. Then we have registration, especially patents. I think patents is going to be one of the first things that will be put onto DLTs. So I think in 10 to 15 years, the patent law offices, they might become obsolete, and patent bureaus of different governments, they might not exist either, because all of those will be put onto DLTs, whether it's blockchain or Hashgraph. You don't need those, governments hiring thousands of people just to run patent offices. Then we can have decentralized auction sites, like decentralized eBay and decentralized Dropboxes and Google Docs and Slack. So just like in the early days of the internet, in the early 90s, it's hard for people at that time to imagine how internet in 20 years would change people's lives, in every single way possible. Same thing with DLTs. Right now, we're just at the beginning stage of DLT. It's hard for us to imagine 15, 20 years later how it's going to affect our daily life. And most of those innovations will not take place until these decentralized applications are being developed. Hashgraph right now they're only building the infrastructure of the DLT. It takes the next generation of entrepreneurs to develop applications on top of Hashgraph layer. That's when the wide adoption will take place. So what's prevent? Sorry, was there a question?
So my question is, in Ethereum and in Bitcoin, they call it as DApps, right? Decentralized
Yes.
apps. What is the terminology to develop applications on Hashgraph?
It's also decentralized applications,
Okay.
apps. So imagine like the common app we use is Uber, right?
Okay.
Uber is I think it's a very unfair, flawed system. I used to drive Uber only for several months, but I realized that Uber just exploits its drivers by taking 30% off the top line of the revenue. Imagine you can connect drivers directly to riders without going through a platform like Uber, and give that 30% to drivers. And that's the difference between centralized applications and decentralized applications.
Okay.
So on Hashgraph, just like on Ethereum, you will develop these decentralized apps. The reason why there's no wide adoption yet for dApps is because the current technology, especially in blockchain, doesn't support such a platform.
Okay.
Because on Uber, for example, there are thousands of transactions that happen every second, all over the world. But if you can only handle 20 transactions per second, it's not feasible.
Okay.
And that's what I think Hashgraph really shines. It's going to enable the next generation of decentralized apps to be implemented worldwide. And that's the next topic, actually, why public ledgers are not being adopted. I mean, Bitcoin has been around for 10 years, since 2009, right? We had several bubbles already, but it still stays in the fringes of society. When you talk to your friends and family about Bitcoin, people will think you're a hacker, or like some kind of shady character or something. Why is that? The reason is because there's no adoption. Why there's no adoption? And that's because of the inherent flaws of these blockchain technologies. And in order for the technology, a DLT to be adopted widely, worldwide, it has to overcome four tenets, four obstacles. One is performance. You got to be fast. Another is security. You can't have people hacking the system all the time. Third is stability. You can't have the blockchain forking at will, just by anyone. Who wants to fork can fork it. I mean, the most recent example is the fiasco of Bitcoin Cash, right? It forked into Bitcoin Cash ABC and SV earlier this year. And this whole thing just caused the collapse of the Bitcoin, cryptocurrency market in the next 6 months. So that's just another turnoff of potential investors into this space, because we don't want to have this system being tempered by just anyone, and that's where Hashgraph shines. Hashgraph In terms of performance, you can do hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, and the latency was reduced from hours down to seconds. In terms of security, it reaches the golden standard of security, which is ADFT, and it's resilient to DDoS attacks and also all kinds of attacks, that we can think of. And it's really stable. It's the vision of Dr. Beard from the beginning to never fork the network. In fact, last year, Dr. Beard created 50 billion cryptocurrencies for Hashgraph called Hbars. And he said that there's not going to be one additional coin that's going to be created on Hashgraph. So 50 billion, that's it. That's the total supply. People argue, Bitcoin also has a fixed supply of 20 million. But that's true and also not true. Yes, Bitcoin itself does have 21 million as cap. But it doesn't really prevent anyone from forking it. We see that with Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Diamond, And each time you fork it, you create another 21 million coins, And these coins are competing against each other, kind of, they're attacking each other. It's like infighting. So and that creates a lot of instability for the system and for the community in general. So that's one thing that Hbar has learned to not do. And lastly, Hbar has a very mature and strategic governance model. It's going to consist, the governance council of Hbar is going to be consisted of 39 members. All 39 members will be international conglomerates. 2 months ago, Hashgraph just announced that the first batch of 5 council members, just give you an idea of who they are. You have Deutsche Telekom, the parent company of T-Mobile. You have Nomura, the largest private bank of Japan. You have Magazine Luiza, one of the largest retailers in South America. Then you have DLP Piper, one of the most reputable and biggest law firms of the world, in the world. And lastly, you have Swiss Telecom. So all these are blue chip players, companies. They're very reputable, trustworthy. And the governance model of Hbar is that each member will serve only 2 terms. Each term consists of 3 years. So each member has to get out, leave the council after 6 years. So this way, it keeps rotating and have new fresh blood coming in every 6 years. And that prevents collusion, prevents politics and bureaucracy being developed. And in the upcoming quarters, Hbar is going to announce the remaining 33 members of the Hbar Council. And I think this is a very mature, strategic way to have a long vision on the development and the direction of how Hashgraph is going to go in the next 10, 20, 30 years that other cryptocurrency projects do not have. And that's why I always say that Hashgraph is like the only adult in a room full of children, in the cryptocurrency community. So lastly, we're going to talk about the infrastructure of Hbar. So at the bottom, we have the internet layer as we know it today. And on top of that, Hbar is going to build the Hashgraph consensus. In fact, that's the slogan of Hashgraph, which is to build the trust layer of the internet. On top of the consensus layer, we have the cryptocurrency, the Hbars, the file storage, and the smart contracts. From those smart contracts, the decentralized applications will be built. And that's where the majority of the innovations will come from. You can almost liken Hashgraph to Cisco in the early 90s. Cisco, the company, Cisco never really developed any internet applications. What Cisco did was to build the infrastructure for internet.
Which company? What is the company name?
Cisco.
Oh,
CISCO.
Oh,
Cisco.
Okay.
Yeah. John Chambers, the CEO. Like, they were the biggest company in the .com era.
Okay.
The reason for that is they built the infrastructure of the internet as we know it. They provided the routers, the switches, laid the wires, fiber optics. But they didn't build any applications. It's not until the next generation of entrepreneurs like Bezos and Jack Ma, they came in and developed applications on top of internet. that this becomes this thing that changes our lives. And the same thing I think is going to happen to Hashgraph. They are not really building any applications, but they're building the layer, the infrastructure, and it takes the next generation of entrepreneurs to make it useful to average folks like you and I. And we already have hundreds of projects being developed on Hashgraph. The hundreds are the ones that we know. There's probably thousands of them that we do not know. Like I'm actually trying to develop a DApp, a decentralized exchange that it's not really officially sanctioned by Hashgraph. Oh no, Hashgraph doesn't know about this yet. So I know if I'm doing it, other people are probably doing it too. So there are probably hundreds of thousands of applications being developed on it. And all these projects, some of these projects will be launched on the day of open access this summer, on the same day. One project that I mentioned earlier was this called Hero.fm. This is the music streaming service I was telling about. If you have a chance, you can search. You guys just go onto your browser and type in Hero.fm.
Can I charge it? Actually, my laptop charge is my laptop is dead. Actually,
no problem. You can check it out later. They are migrating their platform onto Hedera Hashgraph right now, so that they can be deployed on the day of open access this summer. I actually invested in their cryptocurrency called the GEM tokens. So I think it's a very promising project. And in the future, I think they have the potential to replace iTunes, Spotify, and Vivo, these music labels, and truly provide value to content creators like musicians and artists. So with that's all the official material that I have. I think we can open up to any questions and concerns you guys might have.
One of the issues with Bitcoin network is that it is a platform for bad stuff as well as good stuff.
Yes.
And that gets the eyes of regulators, people that are charged to protect us.
Yes.
Consumer protections, securities, exchange, and so forth.
Yes.
And I'm a little disturbed that you're playing out the disintermediation card.
The what?
Disintermediation card, in other words, getting rid of the middleman.
Right.
My own sense is that middle people, like auditors, have a huge role to play to protect us from the crap that goes on in the so-called blockchain world.
Mm-hmm.
Where's Hashgraph in all this? It sounds like we just trade one problem for another problem. It still has the disadvantage of being a Wild West type of environment where people can use the people that can easily get screwed because they're trusting people that shouldn't be trusted.
Well, I can understand the concern, especially considering what's been happening in the cryptocurrency space for the past 2 years. People did get scammed. We talked about the decentralized.
Their ICO scams.
Right, exactly. And that is why I support the Hashgraph stance to distance themselves from the crypto community. They were never really tried to portray themselves to be part of the crowd, the crypto crowd. And it shows from the way they approach their governance model. The reason that there is so many scams in the other cryptocurrencies is because they don't have a governance model. Many of the projects, they were founded by a kid in the basement, and they don't really have a strategic plan of how the network is going to grow. Hashgraph is the complete opposite of that, and we saw that with the governance model. You have these international blue chip companies like Deutsche Telekom getting involved to guide the project, to make sure that it does not disintegrate into anarchy, like Bitcoin Cash, for example. So that's why I like
I get that, but the downside of the governance model is that it's dominated by people that have a stake. in the status quo and the regulatory framework that exists.
Well, yeah, you can say that it's dominated by
Let me
the.
finish. What really matters in governance is the rules of the road that the governance organization adopts and lives up to.
Right.
And it will be interesting to see whether 39 very large 800-pound gorillas can all agree to a common constitution, if you will, on the behavior to protect Hashgraph and also the apps that are built on top of it.
Right. But you have different kind of models of governance, right? You have full main type. You have the dictatorship. One guy says, his word is law, and it has disadvantages and advantages. If you have a good guy, a very smart guy on top, you prosper. If not, you suffer. Then you have the complete democracy. Everyone has one vote, and even the people who don't know what they're talking about, their vote is equally weighted as you are. And I think the most effective way of governing is what hash can be large or small. Hashgraph chooses 39, and these 39 they came from different facets from the business community. They are the 800-pound gorillas you're talking about, and they have the expertise, and they have the far-sighted vision to implement their vision, in the future. So I rather trust their opinion, how they, whatever decision they make as a group, for this platform, than just trust it either to one individual or like a mob. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because they are reputable. They've been around for dozens of years, if not hundreds of years, and they've proven themselves. It's very different from the other cryptocurrencies. Many of them, they're just anarchy. There's no one is in control. Anybody can just fork the Bitcoin, fork the blockchain. And that's why I think the governance model of Hashgraph is the most mature, and it's very different from the other platforms. And that's why I believe Hashgraph is not going to be attracting many scams, and it's going to hurt investors like the other platforms do.
Mm-hmm.
So, does that answer your question?
Well, it's an answer, and I'm not opposed to your answer at all. At the end of the day, you have to trust somebody, not a computer code. Other problems with things like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that has a fixed supply, and the supply adjusts itself automatically based on a computer algorithm. The problem with that is that in the real world, money supplies need to be managed much better than a fixed computer program algorithm. Part of the reason for all of the currency fluctuations you see in Bitcoin is because of